1802, when pelts meant power. The Russians camped on Tlingit turf, hunting otters like it was a Black Friday sale gone wrong. But the Tlingit, with their raven helmets and potlatch alliances, flipped the script from victims to victors overnight. History paints it as a minor skirmish? Hardly. This was the native rebellion that torched a fortress and ransomed survivors, proving fur trade greed had a bloody expiration date. Like a bad investment app crashing, but with spears and cannon fire. The Russians had been pushing eastward for centuries, starting under Ivan the Terrible, swallowing Siberia like a bear devouring a salmon run. By the 1700s, they reached the edge of the American continent, eyeing the fur-rich waters of Alaska. Vitus Bering's 1741 expedition mapped the southeast coast, planting the seed for future claims. Meanwhile, other Europeans, Spaniards, French, and British, had brushed against the Tlingit since the 16th century, trading sporadically but leaving no permanent scars. The Tlingit, a seafaring people with a dominion stretching along the foggy channels of southeast Alaska, numbered around 10,000 souls across fortified villages and allied tribes. They had honed their strength through years of intertribal raids, expanding territories with canoes slicing through icy waters. Their society revolved around seasonal rhythms. Summers spent harvesting salmon runs, supplemented by halibut, seal oil, crabs, and mollusks, while winters hunkered in massive plank houses where shamans danced under auroral lights and chiefs flaunted status through potlatch feasts, gifting jewelry, copper plates, and woven robes. It was a world where generosity equaled power, not hoarding. A system that kept alliances fluid and rivalries sharp. Spring 1802 brought the spark. Alexander Baranov, the iron-fisted manager of the Russian-American company, had his men camped on a remote island off Alaska's coast, scouting for sea otters. Night fell, and out of the mist charged figures that looked ripped from a nightmare. Warriors clad in layered hide cuirasses, reinforced with wood slats and metal scraps. Helmets carved into snarling monster faces, brandishing spears, daggers, and sidearms. Baranov later scribbled in his journal that they were more frightful than the most hellish devils, escaping only thanks to his chainmail vest absorbing a fatal blow. These attackers were Tlingit, not random raiders but a calculated force initially bent on avenging wrongs from the Chugach people. Stumbling upon the Russians, they pivoted to plunder, seeing the intruders as easier prey. The Tlingit weren't primitives. Their armor blended ancient craftsmanship with traded iron, and their dominion was a network of villages where clans intermarried across raven and eagle moieties, forging bonds that turned enemies into kin. In today's terms, it was like a family business merger, but with war canoes instead of boardrooms, ensuring survival in a land where the sea gave life and took it just as quick. Tensions had simmered long before that ambush. The Tlingit had ambitiously bartered sea otter pelts with Spanish, French, and British ships for iron tools and weapons, sharpening their edge in regional power plays. Then came the upstart Americans, merchants from the young United States flooding the coast with muskets and gunpowder in exchange for those glossy furs, which they flipped for profit in Chinese markets. Soon, Tlingit warriors strutted with American rifles and armor studded with Chinese coins, a bizarre fusion of global trade washing up on Alaskan shores. Baranov, heading a state-backed monopoly, clamped down hard. No trading arms to the locals, he ordered, knowing firepower in native hands could unravel his empire. But the damage was done. The Tlingit saw the Russians not as partners but parasites, especially after Baranov's crew established Fort Mikhailovski in 1799 on tenuous permission from a Kix Adi chief. What started as a shaky land deal soured fast, with Russians demanding labor and allegiance, treating the Tlingit like subjects of the distant Tsar. It was colonial overreach at its finest, like a startup CEO assuming the office janitor owes him loyalty shares. The real fuel was the fur frenzy. Baranov's hunters, Russians, allied with conscripted Aleuts, ravaged sea otter populations, hauling in pelts by the thousands for the lucrative trade. This rapacious overhunting gutted the Tlingit's own commerce, as otters vanished from traditional grounds, starving clans of vital exchange goods. Worse, reports trickled in of Russians stealing from Tlingit villages, imprisoning hunters, and killing resistors outright. By spring 1802, a large expedition under Ivan Kuskov pushed southeast, probing deeper into Tlingit waters. Hundreds of warriors ambushed them, unleashing volleys from guns, thrusts from daggers, and stabs from spears. Kuskov's men scrambled to a defensible island, negotiating a fragile truce before limping back to base for reinforcements. Little did they know, this skirmish was the opening act of the Great Tlingit Rebellion, a chain reaction where greed met grit. Picture it as a bad crypto boom, everyone chasing quick riches until the market crashes in blood, leaving empires to pick up the pieces. The 18th of June, 02, hit like a rogue wave nobody saw cresting. The Tlingit, fragmented into clans without a single king or council, found unity in the potlatch rituals where chiefs swapped gifts like currency in a high-stakes poker game, binding raven and eagle moieties through mandatory cross-marriages that turned potential foes into reluctant family. This web of alliances, usually for raids or trade, now wove into something unprecedented, messengers paddling canoes to old enemies, proposing a grand coalition against the Russian foothold, the Kiks. Otti chief who had grudgingly allowed Fort Mikhailovski's construction might have sealed his clan's fate, pledging loyalty to Baranov's crew without grasping the strings attached, like signing a lease that quietly hands over the deed. What started as whispers of resentment swelled into a roar, drawing in Haida and Tsimshian warriors, all eyeing the fur-stacked outpost as a symbol of invasion. Over 1,000 Tlingit fighters converged on the fort in a swarm that defied their decentralized ways, a temporary empire forged in shared fury. The Russians and their elite allies, caught mid-routine, got carved up where they stood, spears punching through coats and gunfire stitching holes in the chaos. Leading the charge was Katlian, a Tlingit war chief whose name would echo like a bad omen in Russian logs, storming the palisades with a ferocity that turned the wooden walls into slaughter pens. Defenders scrambled to higher barracks, blasting cannons in desperation until the barrage overwhelmed them, bodies piling like driftwood after a storm. It was over quick, the fort reduced to a smoldering heap where victors dragged captives and looted pelts, celebrating as if they'd lopped off the head of some imperial serpent slithering into their seas. The next day, a returning Russian hunting party walked into the trap, shredded in ambushes that left no room for mercy, proving this wasn't a raid but a declaration. Alaska's southeast belonged to those who'd bled for it long before any Tsar dreamed of furs. The aftermath reeked of finality, the Tlingit hauling away survivors as bargaining chips while the ruins smoldered. Then Captain Henry Barber's British trading ship nosed into the bay, crew gaping at the charred wreckage littered with mangled corpses, about 20 Russians twisted in death among the embers. Barber, ever the opportunist, played the diplomat card, inviting Katlian and his uncle, Chief Skoutlelt, aboard under pretense of trade talks, only to clap them in irons and dangle execution unless their clan coughed up the prisoners and plundered furs. It worked like a frontier shakedown, Barber pocketing the pelts for himself and ransoming the survivors to Baranov back at Kodiak for 10,000 rubles, a sum that must have stung like salt in an open wound. In the end, this foreign meddler turned Tlingit triumph into a costly reminder that even victories came with outsiders ready to twist the knife, much like a viral scandal where the hero wakes up to find the footage edited against them. Baranov, safe at his Kodiak headquarters, had sensed the Tlingit storm brewing for months, a low rumble of anger from clans he'd tried to placate by curbing his men's looting and keeping hunts out of sight. His countrymen blamed American and British traders for arming the uprising, whispering that foreign guns had lit the fuse, but Baranov knew better, his efforts at restraint clashing with the raw greed that had already stripped otter grounds bare and left Tlingit commerce in tatters. Losing this profitable Alaskan frontier felt like watching a gold mine cave in, and as governor of Russia's American colonies, he lacked the immediate muscle to strike back, his letters seething with frustration over the setback. By early 1803, he rallied his forces with fiery missives, urging them not to falter but to reclaim the lost grounds as proof of Russian grit, like a coach pep-talking a team after a humiliating loss, except the stakes were empires, not trophies. Meanwhile, the Tlingit braced for retaliation, Katlian and his kin stockpiling gunpowder and weapons, convinced the Russians would return with teeth bared. Their worldview, passed down by elders, painted existence as a divine puzzle crafted by Raven, where auroras danced as spirits of brave warriors exalted in the afterlife, and animals like bears, wolves, orcas, eagles, and ravens held their own cunning souls. The Kiks. Otti Raven clan turned to Katlian as war leader, his reputation from the fort's fall making him the natural choice in a society where leadership flowed from deeds, not bloodlines. Fleeing their old village, they resettled on a defensible peninsula near Sitka, erecting Noow Tlein, or Fort of Young Saplings, a massive palisade stretching 245 feet with gates, reinforcing timbers, and gun ports for cannons, sparing no effort to shield civilians from the horrors of past massacres like the Ayacuacuan slaughter 2 decades prior, where Russians had wiped out hundreds in reprisal. It was fortification born of memory, like building a bunker after surviving a siege, ensuring the weak wouldn't drag down the strong. By summer 1804, Baranov's fleets patrolled Tlingit villages, punishing those tied to the 1802 revolt while negotiating truces with others, fracturing the fragile alliances that had fueled the uprising. Distant clans, once tenuously united, now balked at aiding the Kiks, Adi, leaving them isolated like a holdout in a crumbling coalition. Baranov gathered his armada at an abandoned Tlingit site, where fate delivered the Russian naval ship Neva, fresh from the Empire's first global circumnavigation, its captain and 41 sailors eager to join the fray after hearing tales of the lost fort. A Tlingit party returning with fresh powder and guns got ambushed by Neva's cannons, their canoe erupting in a fireball that scattered plans and lives alike. With about 100 armed Russians bolstered by native hunters, Baranov's force swelled, setting the stage for reconquest, a build-up that mirrored a sequel nobody wanted, where the underdog's win gets overwritten by superior firepower and forgotten promises. The 1st of October, 1804, dawned crisp over Sitka Sound, the Russian fleet bobbing like uninvited guests at a tense family gathering. Baranov's armada, now beefed up with the Neva's cannons and crew, hovered outside the shallow waters guarding the Tlingit stronghold, Noow Tlein, that imposing palisade of young saplings engineered for defiance. Inside, Katlian loomed mighty among his warriors, face smeared with charcoal in a fallen raven pattern, helmet echoing the trickster bird, hammer pilfered from a dead Russian smith gripped tight, a tool turned talisman of retribution. He rallied them with chants that cut through the fog, promises of exalted spirits lighting the aurora if they fell holding the line. The Russians poured ashore, dragging artillery through muck, elude allies flanking like reluctant sidekicks in a heist gone sideways. As they neared the walls, Tlingit muskets cracked, dropping invaders mid-stride, splintering formations until warriors burst from the gates in a whirlwind of spears and daggers. Katlian's flanking force hit like a blindside tackle, bones crunching under hammers, flesh parting in furious melee. One sailor hoisted aloft on a spear tip before crumpling. Baranov took a bullet to the arm amid the retreat, his men scrambling back under naval cover fire, leaving 10 dead and 24 wounded scattered like bad bets on a casino floor. The Tlingit claimed the day's spoils, their fort standing as proof that firepower alone couldn't crack, resolve forged in potlatch bonds and ancestral grudges. In the days that followed, sporadic Russian bombardments chipped at the palisade, but it held firm, a testament to Tlingit foresight in every reinforced timber and gunport. Katlian, scanning dwindling powder kegs, knew prolonged sieges favored the side with endless supplies from across oceans, not those reliant on smuggled American munitions. Under negotiation flags that bought precious hours, hundreds slipped away into the night-shrouded forests, elders, women, and children first, then warriors melting into the underbrush like ghosts evading a raid. The exodus turned brutal, a grueling trek through sodden woods and icy passes toward Peril Strait, where hunger gnawed deeper than Russian bullets, exposure claiming lives the battle spared, turning victory's afterglow into a survival gauntlet. It was the kind of strategic pivot that history glosses over, like a startup pulling the plug before bankruptcy hits, but here the cost was measured in frozen footsteps and empty cradles, a calculated fade rather than outright surrender. By the 7th of October, the Russians advanced on an eerily silent fort, breaching gates to find abandonment's grim tableau, a handful of slain young and elderly, dispatched by their own to spare them the march's horrors, bodies left as silent accusations amid empty hearths. Baranov's men torched the structure, erasing the Tlingit handiwork before founding Novo-Arkhangelsk on the ashes, a new settlement staking Russia's claim like a flag planted in contested soil. Come summer 1805, diplomacy thawed the standoff, Baranov hosting exiled Kiks, Adi delegations with calculated respect, days blending ritual dances and songs into negotiations that felt more like uneasy truces than triumph. Gifts flowed both ways. Prisoners swapped like trading cards in a high-stakes game, Baranov parting with a prized copper medal for nominal land rights around his outpost, a deal that papered over wounds but left scars festering beneath. Peace proved as fragile as otter pelts in a storm, with Tlingit clans north of Novo-Arkhangelsk gnawing on resentment as Russians barred traditional fishing grounds and flaunted their otter hunts like victors rubbing salt in open cuts. Starvation whispered through villages, fueling retaliation that crested at the Yakutat trading post, where warriors descended in a fury, slaughtering every Russian inside and razing the site to cinders, a blaze ensuring it never rose again. It was the kind of payback that echoed the 1802 uprising, a reminder that negotiated borders didn't erase the hunger for justice, much like modern sanctions biting back harder than expected, turning economic edges into outright conflicts. The clash's core wasn't clean conquest, but a messy standoff. Novo-Arkhangelsk blooming into Russia's American capital while future outposts veered south to California coasts, dodging the armed Pacific Northwest like a bully steering clear of the kid who fought back. These Russo-native wars simmered into negotiated coexistence, the Tlingit splintering what could have been a seamless frontier expansion, their resistance carving limits into imperial maps without total subjugation. Baranov retired in 1818. Tlingit chiefs including Katlian attending his farewell like old adversaries, sharing a nod over shared battlefields. The governor dying at sea before tasting home soil. His legacy, a mix of admiration for foes' cunning and the bitter aftertaste of incomplete dominance. Russian traders squeezed labor and tribute from local populations post-war, a grind that sparked armed pushback from Tlingit warriors and subtle advocacy from Orthodox missionaries embedding in villages. This dual pressure nudged policy shifts, tsarist decrees in the 1820s outlawing taxes or forced offerings, mandating goodwill preservation and barring any whiff of independence infringement, a rare imperial backpedal, acknowledging that overreach bred rebellion. No floods of Russian settlers arrived, no wholesale exiles uprooted clans, leaving the landscape dotted with Tlingit autonomy amid colonial shadows. Katlian ruled long over his people, eventually guiding their return to Sitka's environs, where drifting canoes, towering totems, and grand plank houses endured as markers of a dominion that bent but never broke. The Tlingit flipped the fur trade script from invasion to impasse, severing Russian ambitions one ambush at a time. History filed it as a footnote, but it etched limits on empires chasing pelts over people. Reflection hits hardest in the quiet. Coexistence wasn't charity, just pragmatism after blood proved greed's poor partner. Subscribe to High 89 Studio for more unflinching history. Comment your take below.